Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to In the Zone. Coach Richie Sutter with Pete Coles and very special guest today, folks, Coach Jim Larrañaga, formerly of the Miami Hurricanes. Coach Larrañaga and I go way back in this business. I'm going to say that my job at All Hallows, when I first started with Coach John Carey, who's a very good friend of Coach Larrañaga's, Coach Larrañaga was the first college coach that I met in my entire lifetime. He's working as assistant coach at the University of Virginia for a legendary coach, Terry Holland. But, Coach, I wanted to start back in New York because we've got some commonalities here with Coach Carey, who's a very close friend of yours, but I also have always been indebted to have worked for the absolute greatest basketball coach of all time, Jack Curran. So let's start with Malloy and what that did for you and what foundation did that lay for you?
Well, Richie, thanks so much for inviting me to be on, and I'm happy to share some of my experiences with your audience. I grew up in the Bronx. John Carey and I played on the same elementary school team. John is 1 year ahead of me, and when he was in the 8th grade, he got recruited to Archbishop Malloy, actually offered a scholarship, and then asked me the following year if I would try out for a scholarship, and I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship as well. So I took the Q44 city bus from the Bronx to Queens and attended Archbishop Malloy. As a freshman, I played on a very good freshman team. At Christmas time, we were undefeated, 7-0. And when I came back for the new year, Mr. Curran called me into his office. He always called me Larry. Larry.
Yes, he did.
Your freshman coach quit. I want you to coach the freshman team. I said, well, Mr. Curran, you know I'm only 14 years old. And he said, that's all right. You'll do a great job. Dick Zeitler will help you. Zeitler was our point guard. So Dick and I coached the freshman team. We went undefeated, 21-0, won the city championship. And from that moment on, I wanted to be a coach, either at the high school or college level. And Jack Curran was my role model. I try to model my coaching career after him.
How fortunate we both were to have a role model such as Jack Curran. You mentioned Dick Zeitler. He was a great basketball coach at Holy Trinity High School out on the island for a long time as well, too. I was a very good basketball coach. Let's just jump into Coach Curran just a little bit tighter. What did that do for your philosophy as far as people, basketball, professionalism?
Well, the first thing you had to learn and know about Mr. Curran, he was a devout Catholic. He went to Mass every single day, was a daily communicant, and he lived that life. He never used a vulgarity, not in all the years that I knew him. And I'm talking about from the time I was 13 years old till I was 63. That's 50 years. Never heard him use a vulgarity, not in practice, not in games, not in the locker room, not in conversation with people. And in today's age, I don't know any of my friends in coaching that don't use vulgarity, but I never did with my players. Mr. Curran sent a very strong message about being self-disciplined, being organized, and if you're going to coach, be a teacher. And I never had a math teacher, an English teacher, swear at me and curse me out. So I try to follow Mr. Curran's example. He was a great teacher. I played the 4-5 in high school, and I played the point guard position at Providence College. That was all because of his teachings of the fundamentals of the game. I had to learn every position on the court. And eventually, I think that really helped me relate to my players at the college level.
I kind of liken it to being in Harvard Law School for coaches, the 2 years that I got to spend with him. It was an absolute joy to eat lunch with him every day and just ensconce in his ability. I was on a team where, I came in where we had Kenny Anderson, who was a sophomore, maybe the #1 player in the country as a sophomore, Robert Wardan, who went to St. John's, Ralph James, who played at Harvard. We absolutely were loaded with players. But I had never, ever seen in my life a coach that had just such command in such a Christian way. And it was just a beautiful thing to see. Let's talk about Coach Caputo for a minute. He's our other commonality. Coach Chris Caputo, my first recruit at Westfield State University. Soon as I got the job, I picked up the phone. I called Coach Curran, and I said, who's available? And he said, I've got a great point guard for you by the name of Chris Caputo. And that was where our relationship began. He wound up being a great player at Westfield State, wound up being captain, and somebody that we've both had in our lives and have been fortunate to have in our lives. But let's just talk about Coach Caputo's first couple of years at George Mason. What did you see there that you see now that's not a surprise to anybody?
Well, first of all, Rich, I met Chris Caputo at an all-star game in Connecticut when he was playing for you at Westfield State. He came up to me in the stands, introduced himself, and told me he wanted to get into college coaching. So I gave him my email address and told him to stay in touch. He emailed me almost every day for the next year. And so I felt like, okay, I'm communicating with this young man. He's very passionate. He wants to get into college coaching. Let's see if I can help him. So I brought him in for an interview. I had a position open on my staff. I interviewed him. He did a great job, but I decided to hire someone else. And I offered Chris the volunteer position, meaning, hey, I can give you some experience, but I don't have a position to pay you. He was willing to sacrifice the finances to come and work with me and with my assistant coaches. And he did that for 3 years. He made that kind of sacrifice. So when another assistant coach was elevated and moved on, I elevated Chris, and he became not only a full-time assistant, but eventually an associate head coach. He was with me for 20 years, 3 as a volunteer, many years at George Mason, and then the last 10 years or 11 years at Miami.
So obviously, I like to have good relationships with the parents, and I met the Caputo family very, very close into his freshman year. Really thoroughly enjoyed them, really thought the world of them, in terms of what their whole story was. But right at the time Chris was graduating, it was right around the time we had our senior night, and his father, Lou, grabbed me in the hallway, and he said, Coach, I got to ask you something. He said, do you think this coaching thing will work out for him? And I said, I can only go by what Jack Curran said, and Jack Curran said that he'll be the next Mike Fratello.
That's an interesting comparison. I say he'll be the next Lou Carnesecca.
Very, very similar, And what I said to Mr. Caputo, Lou at that time, who I loved, a musician who had the spirit of a musician. His whole spirit was built on a musical vibration, just a wonderful human being. And I said to him, what are your options? He said, I've saved enough money to send Chris to graduate school, or we can have him go down and work with Coach Larrañaga for a couple of years. And I said, we're picking Coach Larrañaga. Graduate school can be grabbed along the way, but you're never, ever going to find a better mentor in the game right now than Coach Larrañaga. And if he's having any spot that's available, you have to take it. You got to get in there and prove what you can do. And that's exactly what happened. He proved what he could do. And right now, we're looking at the work of always 20 plus years. It never comes easy, but I look at him with such great pride, and I guess you must as well. So let's just talk about his spirit a little bit and what that did for you when you were both at Mason on a Final Four run, the Cinderella of Cinderella runs of all time, and then on to Miami with a myriad of great recruits and great years and such great time for the Miami basketball program. Talk about his piece in that.
Yeah, first of all, you got to understand that Chris is very, very passionate. He has a lot of ideas, and he's very confident. And so his first week at George Mason, he drives up to campus as a volunteer now. He has his own car. He's making no money. He drives up in a Mercedes. And all the coaches look at him, wait, you don't even have a salary and you're driving a Mercedes? So he was in a good position because his family was so supportive. Then he shared an office with an older gentleman, our equipment manager, and a guy named Smitty. And Chris wrote down some things, and he came into my office and said, "Coach L, can I meet with you?" So he came into my office, and he started reading his list of things that I should do. Here are things you should do. Here are the players you should call. Here are the coaches you should call. And about, I don't know, 5 minutes into his monologue, I stopped him and said, "Chris, don't you understand? I'm the head coach and I delegate to you. You don't delegate up to the head coach." And he smiled and laughed and said, "Sorry, I'm just so excited. I want to do a great job." And he did. So his responsibility right away was to network. And he's probably the best networker I've ever been around. He
Hands
got in
down.
touch with every high school coach, AAU coach, and developed a great relationship with them. And that developed into great recruiting opportunities for George Mason. So that when our team made the run to the Final Four in 2006, Chris had been instrumental in laying the groundwork for us to recruit all those guys. Because even though he couldn't speak to recruits, a volunteer can't call a recruit. A volunteer can call a high school coach, can call an AAU coach, and he would gather a lot of information about them. So, two players in particular, John Vaughn and Follerin Campbell, were two players that played the same position in high school, both about 6'4", 6'5", really two guards, but could handle the ball, play a little bit of point, maybe play a little bit of three. And Chris was adamant that they could play together. So in July of the recruiting period, rather than me going to Las Vegas to watch some of the great players in the country play, Chris Caputo and my staff recommended that I stay home and go to a summer league game, the High Point Summer League game, only to watch two guys, John Vaughn and Follerin Campbell. And that paid off. We signed both of them. They roomed together. They were best friends. And they were very, very instrumental in our success over the next 4 years. Follerin Campbell moved from the wing to the point guard position and really led us to the Final Four. And Chris was instrumental in helping us recruit all those guys and reach the Final Four. And not just as a recruiter, but then he was a full-time assistant and coached all those guys.
I always said whatever phone company gave him free cell phone minutes was really in trouble. They were going to lose. They were going to lose every time because I agree with you 100%. I've never watched anybody network, and it's still going on today. His Rolodex is amazing, and the amount of people that he knows and can contact is just super. Super. I want to take it back just a little bit because we do have one more commonality, and that's the Big O, Olden Polynice. The Big O. You had recruited successfully, maybe at that time, what I thought was probably the greatest recruiting coup that I had seen since I had gotten into the business as a young coach, and that was Ralph Sampson, the great Ralph Sampson. And to take Ralph Sampson's place, Olden Polynice was the select and the recruit that came in and had to follow in such big shoes. But let's talk about the Big O for a minute because he was amazing and he was such a great person, great player, another great family behind him, and another Jim Larrañaga great success story. So let's just talk about the Big O, and then we're going to go on and talk about your career a little bit more in depth.
Well, Olden Polynice came from Haiti, moved to New York when his dad moved and became a cab driver. And then his whole family ended up in the city. And Olden went to All Hallows High School, played for John Kerry. John was my point guard in high school, so we were very, very close. You knew Olden at All Hallows. And he was kind of what I would call a diamond in the rough. He wasn't a finished product, but he had size at 6'10". He had an understanding of the game. He was very smart. He was a good student. And so we brought him in for camp. He attended the University of Virginia basketball camp, and he struggled there socially. It was awkward for him. And in fact, we sat on the steps out in front of Memorial Gym, and he basically cried on my shoulder that he wasn't getting along with anybody.
I brought him there.
We recruited him successfully. The official visit that he took, we dubbed the Riverside Church Weekend. Ernie Lorch, the coach of Riverside Church, the organizer of Riverside Church, had 4 great players that year. Kenny the Jet Smith, Bruce Dalrymple, a high school All-American and Georgia Tech signee, Tommy Sheehy, who was the Golden Globe Award winner for National Player of the Year, and Olden Polynice. So Kenny the Jet, Bruce Dalrymple, Tommy Sheehy, and Olden Polynice all visited together. And eventually, Kenny signed with Carolina, Bruce signed with Georgia Tech, but we got both Tommy Sheehy and Olden to come to Virginia, and they both had a tremendous impact as freshmen and actually were a big, big part of our UVA team getting to the Final Four in 1984. And Olden was named to the all-tournament team for the Eastern Division.
It's just amazing. Just amazing. He was just such a great, great young man, and I know he benefited from being at UVA. And I was also a beneficiary of that because right at that time, Jim O'Brien got the St. Bonaventure job. And John Kerry calls me on the phone and he says, "You're going to go to St. Bonaventure with Jim O'Brien." And I said, "That's my dream school, John. I'll walk to St. Bonaventure." And he said, "Look, Olden's going to visit. One of his 5 visits is going to be to go to St. Bonaventure. That's how you got to go there." And I was like, "God, John, that's the nicest thing I think anybody's ever done for me." And he goes, and I go, "Is there a shot he's going to go to Bonaventure?" He goes, "No, he's going to Virginia." And I looked at him and I go, "Well, how did I get to go to Bonaventure?" He goes, "Just don't ask. He's going to Virginia with Larrañaga. It's a done deal, but you're just going to go there and he's going to visit and you're going to have a good time with him." And I got to go to St. Bonaventure because of all of that going on at that time. It was amazing. Just truly, truly amazing. Coach, Jim O'Brien,
Richie,
I don't know if you would remember. Say that again?
Interject that Jimmy O'Brien and I were best friends in high school. I wanted to go to Boston College with him. Bob Cousy didn't offer me a scholarship, so I went to Providence. But Jim O'Brien and I have remained very close friends.
He is the absolute best.
He lives in Boston, and
he's
his wife Mary.
He's the best of the best.
Visit regularly.
I'll give you one now that you might not even remember. But Obi's first technical foul ever issued to him as a head coach was issued to him at Bowling Green State University when you were the head coach there.
I wasn't the head coach.
You weren't?
It was John Weiner. Obi told me the story about John Weiner taking his jacket off. It drove him nuts.
I could have sworn that you had gotten into Bowling Green by then.
I'm sorry?
I could have sworn that you had gotten into Bowling Green by then. That was one of your first years.
OB.
There you go. So let's talk about that Final Four run to Mason. Jim Englehart, his wife Jackie, Cinderella holding the slipper. There's just so many people involved in that I had just known, and it was so awesome. But that's one of the great, great stories of the NCAA tournament. And something that Pete and I talk about here, kind of with sadness, that there seems to be a movement afoot to try and make sure that doesn't happen again. And I just wanted you to reflect on that for a moment, talk about that team, and talk about what that meant to George Mason University.
Well, first of all, a lot of people, ask asked me over the years, when did you think you had a shot at that? And they're surprised when I tell them back in October. And they say, well, what made you think that? And I said, well, first of all, I invited Dr. Bob Rotella, a very famous, world famous sports psychologist. Everybody in the golfing world knows Dr. Bob Rotella. He's a dear, dear friend of mine and has been since my days at UVA. And I invited Rotella in to speak with my team in October, and he asked them how good they thought they could be. What kind of belief do you have in yourself and in your teammates and in your coaches? What do you think you can accomplish? And Lamar Butler, one of our senior captains, said, Dr. Rotella, I think we could get to the Final Four. That's how good I think we are. And from that moment on, that became our goal, that our players really believed in themselves. We ended up winning the regular season in our conference. Unfortunately, got beat in the semifinals of the tournament, of the conference tournament in the CAA. But we became like the first team in CAA history to get an at-large bid to the NCAA tournament. And a lot of people, including Billy Packer and Jim Nance, said we didn't belong because we played in such a small conference. But I told the team they had never seen us play. They don't know how good we are. And so our team went into the NCAA tournament that year with a tremendous amount of confidence in themselves. And we beat 3 previous national champions. We didn't sneak into the Final Four. We beat Michigan State. We beat Carolina, who was the defending national champion. We beat Wichita State, who won the Missouri Valley. And we beat the overall #1 seed in the tournament, the University of Connecticut. And by doing that, the response to the country was to get behind George Mason. Our bookstore sold $1 million worth of gear the week of the Final Four. Our university's website got 800% more hits, and the admissions office got, I forget, 200% more applicants. So it had a tremendous boost for the George Mason University. And a lot of people thought George Mason was a small private school. They didn't know until that run that we were the largest state university in the state of Virginia.
Beautiful. That's a great story. And that transitioned into the Miami story, which was a beautiful, beautiful story and still continues to this day. I did want to jump in here because when you were talking about Olden at camp, I was the guy who brought Olden to camp. And we went every single year, you know, and that's how I met Jim O'Brien at University of Connecticut, Frank Dyer at Siena, just so many great people as we went around that circuit. But I did want to say that one of the people that really was very so open-hearted to Olden and I is your wife Liz, you know, and I just, you two are just this magical couple. My wife and I kind of a little bit in that similar vein, but I just wanted you to reflect on the family side of this because you have, you know, your boys are in the, you know, one of them's in the game right now, coaching and doing great things. And but I wanted to start with your wife Liz because she was just a special person to me. And I remember you're playing in Providence a little while back, and I was sitting next to Mrs. Larrañaga. She's just such a graceful, beautiful person, and I wanted you to reflect on your lives together, your family, and what that has meant to you as well.
Yeah, my wife and I decided a long time ago to be teammates, that we would work at everything together. She's always been a major part of my coaching career in the basketball program. My players love her. She cooked for them. We'd have a recruiting weekend. I'd have the whole team, 15 guys. We'd have recruits, 2 or 3 recruits, their parents, and then my coaching staff, about 30 people. And she would cook for the whole crowd. We didn't cater it. She'd cook steaks, she'd bake potatoes, she cooked rice, she'd have a salad and dessert. She baked chocolate chip cookies for everybody. And so our players know she was a huge part of my philosophy and my coaching style. She was like the head coach, and I was working for her because she was always giving me good advice as to how to get things done. She's very much a people person.
I think
My
we
two
have.
sons, our sons were born and brought up in that kind of family atmosphere where my sons were a part of our team. So at Bowling Green, the players came over. We had a basement with all the players' pictures, a pool table, a ping pong table. And my players, my sons grew up with my coaches and with my players. So it was one big happy family. My son Jay is now an assistant coach in the NBA, has been for 15 years. He's now with the LA Clippers. He spent 9 years with the Boston Celtics, 2 years as a head coach in the G League. My son John is a successful businessman in Washington, D.C., and he has two sons who are playing high school basketball in the DMV. So
Wow.
we're a basketball family. I have one grandson who's a freshman at the University of Miami and a granddaughter who graduated from TCU. So it's very much a family affair when it comes to the Larrañagas.
That's such a blessing, you know. And I think we have possibly Miss Julie Caputo is following in those footsteps. I believe. I think she strikes me very much as a person very similar to your wife Liz, and I would imagine that she's taken and drawn quite a few things from how to be the first lady of GW basketball, you know, from a great role model such as Liz. 716 victories, Coach. That's quite an amazement. People came from all over the world, you know, that in my world anyway, that I crashed 400 victories this year as a head coach at Westfield State. And that was really, it was cool for me. And then I looked down at your number and I was like, oh my God, I got work to do. 716 victories. I thought I was pretty good sitting on 400, but this is an amazing number. Let's reflect on that for a bit, Coach. 716 victories at Bowling Green, at George Mason, and at the University of Miami. It's a storied career, Hall of Fame career in my opinion, but let's reflect on that just a quick moment.
Okay, so I think the stat that I'm most proud of, because I had no idea that this was even a possibility, but I'm the only head coach in the history of Division I basketball to win 100 or more conference games at 3 different Division I schools. With all the great college basketball coaches in the country, the guys like Mike Krzyzewski and Roy Williams, guys like that, they did it. Coach K did it basically at one school at Duke, and Roy Williams did it at 2 schools at Kansas and Carolina. My journey was at a school like Bowling Green, which is not a household name in basketball. George Mason, who had 7 consecutive losing seasons before my staff and I arrived, and then Miami, which was considered a football school. So to do it at those 3 institutions and to accomplish, twice reaching the Final Four, getting to the Sweet 16s a bunch of times, getting to the Elite Eight twice, those are great memories, and it takes a village to accomplish that. My assistant coaches, I've had great assistant coaches, guys who've moved on to become great head coaches. We've mentioned Chris Caputo, but Eric Conkle is at Tulsa. Adam Fisher is at Temple University, one of the great basketball schools of all time. I've had guys like Jeff Schneider and Ricky Snokes, Anthony Solomon, Derek Kellogg, so many other guys
Michael
who
Huger.
have been successful, and Bill Courtney, who passed away this year, unfortunately. He was the head coach at Cornell. Mike Gillian, the head coach of Longwood. So those are the guys, including the staff and all the players. The great players that we had at Bowling Green. My own son Jay, Antonio Daniels, who played 14 years in the league. At George Mason, the players that got us to the Final Four. Luke Hancock, who was a great player at George Mason, transferred to Louisville and won the most outstanding player for Louisville when they won the national championship. He was the most outstanding player in the Final Four. And then Miami, our Final Four run with so many great players, Isaiah Wong, Jordan Miller, Nigel Pack, Norshad Omier. I've been very, very fortunate, lucky to have had the pleasure of being associated with so many great players and coaches.
Bob Dylan said it best, Coach. I can't help it if I'm lucky.
Yeah.
Hey, Coach, I wanted to thank you for joining us. We're right up on a half hour now. That was the quickest half hour I've ever done in an interview. But I wanted to thank you immensely for taking the time to join us today in the zone. And our folks and listeners are going to really, really enjoy this interview. Just wanted to thank you again for coming on with us and having such a great time. Appreciate you.
My pleasure, Rich, and good luck to you.
All the best, Coach. We'll be in touch. Thank you so much. Pete. There it is.
That was awesome. I learned a lot. I'm just listening to what was going on and learning. And
he's just an incredible guy.
Yeah.
Just an incredible guy. I've known him my whole life in coaching, and he actually was the first coach that I ever met in the business, and I knew right then that he was going to be something really successful because he just really, really jumped out at me, as a person. And it really, it was a great time to watch him as his career grows, to have Chris Caputo involved with it, Olden Polynice, John Kerry, Jack Curran, so many different people that we have connectivity to. It's kind of like one big happy family. And Pete, I see you got Pete's Corner up, but I don't know that we have time for that. Can we jump into the Power 15 instead?
Sure, we can.
All right. Did you want to hit me with something quick, and I'll see if I can bump through it quickly?
One quick question, yes.
Yeah, let's do it.
I was looking around the portal listings this week, and I don't understand how you can field a team when you lose your entire team every year and you get an entirely new team every year. I was just watching George Washington, because that's a school we've talked about, and that's where I believe that's where Chris is. He lost 8 players, and he's got 6 back in the portal. But how do you coach a team when your team is in turmoil all the time?
So there were a number of seniors that graduated as well. One of their best players, Rafael Castro. So I'm in communication with Coach Caputo fairly regularly. It's not fun. I don't think there's a lot of people having fun up there, but there's few people that are really equipped to handle it like he is. If you ask me, because his networking, his ability to really work and know that you can go to your network at any time and say, okay, we got to activate it. We got to pump it. Let's go. And then although the numbers are pretty large right now, they become, almost like a reset, for some of the coaches, because you get to move some other people out. But as I texted to him, opportunity knocks also. Because now you're going into a portal again with a number of really good players that are out there, and you might land somebody even better than the guy that you had. So it's daunting. It's crazy. But right now, I think GW is handling it very, very well. Some of the other schools in that league are handling it very, very well. And it's really, really just based upon your ability right now to have and raise money. If you look at the standings of the A10 right now, it went down the line fairly uniformly about who had the most money and who had the least amount of money in terms of their standing. So I think it's one of these things right now where it's settling into a bit of a new normal, and where you look at some of the teams that have gotten absolutely ripped up, in this process. St. Bonaventure is similar. A lot of the A10 teams are going through similar things. There's two sides to that. A, you're doing a really good job because somebody else wants your players.
Right.
You're doing a great job because your players are moving up to that next level and getting paid at a level that's significantly higher than what they were. That's the good piece. The bad piece is that you have to constantly worry about your chemistry in your locker room, and that's one that's, you and I talk about all the time. That's that intangible thing that teams live off of.
Yeah, but how
that's
do you
the oxygen of that, and you can't create chemistry like that.
Yeah,
it's not possible.
How do you win in the NCAA tournament if you're constantly? We're saying like these mid-major teams are constantly turning over. Yeah, it's great your players are getting more money somewhere else, but you're also not getting to the tournament, and that's not helpful to your school.
And you're going to see a whole list of guys that move up that don't have the same ability to do well as they would have done on that mid-major level. You know, you have some guys that were doing great. And what I think is going to happen is these mid-major programs are going to be able to significantly run at the bottom of some of the Power Four conferences with the money that they have. So the top level of the A10 and you take the bottom level of the Big East, that number is pretty close right now.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have an ability right now. There's two things at play in this whole formula that are, you really can button it down to 1 and 2. Number one is retention. Can you retain the players that you currently have so that you're building that chemistry? It's really hard to do on the mid-major level right now. The second piece of it is evaluation. All right? Kentucky had $22 million last year. Michigan, you could say that if they needed to have 22, Michigan probably could have got to 22. But the word on the street is that they operated with a little bit less than what Kentucky had. The evaluation piece there for Michigan, they brought in Ade Mara, they brought in Marez Johnson, they brought in Yaxel Lenenberg, they brought in Elliot Cadeau, they brought in 4 guys that led them to the national championship.
Yeah.
Kentucky brought in a bunch of guys that led them into the quagmire. And so evaluation is everything right now. If you don't have somebody on your staff that's an acute evaluator of basketball talent, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to be following metrics instead of following the game. And when you follow metrics, you're going to wind up with guys that are pieces that don't necessarily all fit together. And I know where they're at right now, and I know how hard it is, but right now, that should be on your staff, somebody's full-time job every single day of the week. You don't scout. You don't do anything else. You don't have any other responsibility except to go through and vet every single recruit that might come available to us prior to them coming available to us. You've got to do your homework way, way above board before you get it done. Because if you're just going to go now, open up a portal, open up into a computer program where these guys now have these computer programs they're probably making $1 gazillion off of, but they have these programs now where you can punch a guy in and they'll give you a score. You know, what was the score on Jaden Quaintance last year? He hardly played for Kentucky. What was the score on some of those other guys that went up top? You'll see they had some really, really high scores and they wound up stinking the lights out. And then there were some other guys that didn't get those really high scores. They came in and they were really, really solid guys because they know how to play. And there's other guys with talent that don't know how to play. You want to avoid those guys. There's guys right now, if I was on that level, I'm moneyballing the whole thing.
Yep.
I'm moneyballing it. Do you shoot 45% from the floor? Do you shoot 35% from three-point range? And do you shoot above 75% from the free throw line?
Right.
Especially at crunch time. Because that's how you win games. That's how you make it happen. So with me, I'd be looking at that money ball, but I also want to know that the guy, because there's two things that, and I'm going to say this to all the coaches out there right now, there's two things that you cannot teach, okay? You can't teach a guy to play hard. He either does or he does not.
Right.
And you need the guys on your team that play hard, that have that high motor. The last thing also is if this is my experience, maybe there can be some improvement, but you're never going to take a guy who's a terrible shooter and make him into Chris Mullin. You're never going to take a guy who's a terrible shooter and turn him into Ray Allen. They just don't have the eye. They just don't have the feel. They don't have the touch. And those are the guys that you have. There's a very, very few of those guys that can absolutely do that are actually worth having, because Chris Mullin had a defensive deficit. He couldn't guard a bank with a gun and a badge, honestly. But his jump shot was the purest in the game at that time.
Yep.
And that's what he lived off of. That's what he reigned off of. Now, he was an above-average athlete for a guy that looked the way he did. And he had some other pieces to his game that he really knew how to play. But if you're talking about his defensive abilities, forget about it. It's one of the reasons he struggled in the pros. He just didn't have the physical equipment for that. All right, Pete, let's run into the Power 15, because then we're going to jump into the playoffs, and that'll give you a little bit of playoff stuff going on right now. 64-18 for the Thunder. They're the big dog right now. They've got it going on. They had another victory last night. They're 2-0. San Antonio Spurs, 62-20. Bad news hit San Antonio last week, Pete. The big guy, Wembayana, the stick went down, smashed his head on the ground pretty hard, had a bad fall. We're going to see and have to monitor that to see what the concussion does and see how long their protocols are for holding him out. Some rest right now for the Spurs would be a good thing. Detroit Pistons, they got lumped up in their first game against the Orlando Magic. That's going to be an interesting series to keep an eye on. They've leveled it out 1-1. But as we talked about last year, that's that punch that comes out of the first round, okay? When you take somebody's home court advantage, that's that punch. Orlando has successfully taken that home court advantage from the Detroit Pistons. That's huge. Boston Celtics, they got punched too. They got hit too. They're at a 1-1 right now. This is just, there's going to be, these series that are right now, they're going to be, the NBA obviously has to drag them out till June. So there's going to be some ups and downs here. You're going to see with these different series. Right now, the 76ers put it on the Celtics the other night. Denver Nuggets, 54-28. They're in a split. There's a lot going on in this thing right now. And what's going to be this first round is going to be very, very telling. You got the Lakers, 53-29, but guess what? They're 2-0. No Luka, no Reeves, and LeBron looks like he's 25 again. The last two games, Pete and I have gone on this ad nauseum, back and forth. There is not a lot of diminishment in his game right now. Now, this is for my little in-the-zone piece of advice for the Houston Rockets. Fire your defensive coordinator. LeBron James had 5-6 dunks the other night, just running into the basket with nobody there to stop him. The tanking season is over, fellas. You're in the playoffs. Act like it. They're going to get punched out. The Rockets, they're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 if it's not careful. 52-30, good run for them. Minnesota Timberwolves, they're in the thick of things. They're in a split. They're in the split with the Nuggets. Now you got the Hawks. They're up there with the Knicks. They got a split. They knocked them off the other night. They are a very, very interesting young team right now, this Hawks team. The Raptors, 46-36. 76ers gave it to the Celtics the other night. I was interested to see that. Magic and the Suns. The Suns got their hands full because they're playing OKC right now, and they got that OKC whistle blowing, baby. If Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or LeBron James has a butterfly flap his wings within a mile of him, they call a foul. Devin Booker last night for the Suns getting absolutely beat and rapschnaggled down the line. They don't call nothing. It's getting to the point where Doris Burke called him out the other night. She just said, "What is this?" and put a bunch of clips up there of Alexander not even being touched, and they put him on the line. And this guy, Booker, getting down there and being hit over the head with an Encyclopedia Britannica and not even being shown any love to get to the line. So it's going to be interesting. In the early playoff picture, you had the Hornets and the Heat. Boom, 127-126. That took the Heat out. You're in the lottery. The Blazers knocked out. The Blazers took out the Suns in that game. That was a 7-8 game. That put the Blazers up to play the Spurs and left the Suns on to challenge the Warriors, and they wound up beating the Warriors, knocked them out. They're out of the playoffs. The champagne bottle has been cracked in my house, and there's another bottle sitting right next to it for the day that Steve Kerr says he's not coming back. I'm waiting. I cannot wait for that day to come. Okay? Now, if that does happen, you're looking at maybe the kid Golden from the Florida Gators, maybe jumping into the NBA ranks. You may look at the name Danny Hurley come up again if the Golden State Warriors job opens up. And you're also looking at possibly now Billy Donovan just let go by the Bulls. You're going to keep an eye on some of those retirement jobs that might come out right now. If Kansas opens, you might see Donovan jump on that. Some other jobs that might open, you might see that happen. 76ers, 109-97 over the Magic. That put the Sixers in with the Celtics, and it matched the Magic up with the Hornets. They wound up beating the Hornets, and the Magic are in a series right now. Warriors, 126-121 over the Clippers. The Clippers got clipped. That set the Warriors up versus the Suns in that play-in game, and we know how that went. The Suns took them. Magic, 121 over 90 over the Hornets. They just blew them out. The Hornets are out. Gone. Go to the lottery. Suns 111 to 96 over the Warriors. That knocked the Warriors out. The Suns got OKC and the Warriors and hopefully Steve Kerr on the way out the door. Okay, so now you got to move and groove. You got the playoffs coming in here. Now you got the Magic and the Pistons. Game 1, Magic, boom, 112, 101. Knocked them right out of the box. Banchero, 23, 9, and 4. It gave up a really good game from Cade Cunningham, who had 39 points. You got the Spurs, 111, 98 over the Blazers, but the Blazers came back and knocked on that door. Wemby had 35 points in that game, but got hurt in game 2. Cavaliers, 115. 105 over the Raptors. The Cavs jumped out 2-0. Mitchell and Harden 1-2 bang bang for 58 points. The Hawks 107-106 over the Knicks. You could see it. You could see it. They tied the series 1-1. McCollum had 32 points. Somebody better get on him. This is the guy, C.J. McCollum, that they traded for the Wizards in the middle of the year when they put Trae Young on the Wizards. And everybody scratched their head and said, what they're doing. This guy's from Lehigh in the Patriot League, been in the pros for about 15 years right now. I got news for you, folks. Don't leave him open. All right. Now we got the Timberwolves 119 over the Nuggets. That tied the series 1-1. Edwards had 30 points, 10 rebounds, 2 assists. There's the 76ers, 111-97. The series is tied 1-1. VJ Max goes for 59 points, 30 for Maxey, 29 for, I think that's the other way around. I think it was 30 for VJ and 29 for Tyrese Maxey. All right, so now you got the Blazers and the Spurs, 106-103. This is what we were talking about. When Wembanyama went out, it was tied 1-1. Scoot Henderson, you remember that name, Pete?
Yep.
He was a draft pick taken 3rd overall in the draft a number of years ago and then absolutely disappeared off the face of the earth. 31 points the other night. Scoot is back, baby. Lakers 101-94 over the Rockets, and they're handling these guys. They are absolutely handling them. They're up 2-0, and LeBron went for 28, 8, and 7 assists. Really good overall game. And I will throw out at this point, too, he got to play in a playoff game with his son. That's a first of the NBA, and I think that was exciting for both of them. Here's the Pistons, 98-83 over the Magics to tie it up 1-1. Cade, 27, 6, 11 assists. What a monster game that is. OKC over the Suns, 120, 107. SGA and J. Will just dominant right now. So here's where you're at in your playoff scenario right now. There's been other games as well. We'll clean that up for you right now. You had the Raptors and the Cavaliers, 126-113. The Raptors just can't get going. Scotty Barnes is doing well, but they got that 1-2 punch of Mitchell and Harden, and it's really that they had 54 and 58. Nuggets 116-105 over the Timberwolves. That evens it up for them. Joker 25, 13, and 11. The Knicks got off 113-102. That's where they jumped out over 1-0 over the Hawks. The Lakers 107-98 over the Rockets. That's another given a game that gives them 2-0. Celtics jumped all over the 76ers in game 1, 123-91. They came back. And the Thunder and the Spurs just really not much they can do about it right there. Okay, Pete, so we've got about 10 minutes, all right? And we're going to roll down now and give you exactly where everything is at. Where are the playoff series at? What are our predictions? What do we think can happen? And then speak about what will be happening next if we can draw some conclusions from that. So you've got, I think you had the Lakers, in that 4 spot. If they win, I think they get OKC. I'm going to look at this again to give you that next round. But right now you got OKC and the Suns. OKC's up 2-0. J. Will is back for the Thunder, and that's a huge piece. They got Holmgren. They've got SGA. They've got a really good team. Hartenstein. They've got a very good team there. And what Sam Presti said was, and I thought it was very interesting, was he goes, we're not into the process. We're not into the outcomes. We're into the process. You know, and as much as you get an outcome that was good, we won the title last year, we're into our process more than we're into the outcomes. And I thought that was really interesting and a very, very intelligent thing to say. The Suns are going back home now, and they weren't able to strike up the band. You know, you weren't really able to get one win there, and you weren't able really to look good in either game. You know, I think going back to OKC, they'd be lucky, I think, in this series to grab one game at all. I think they'd be lucky to get a game. I'm going to keep an eye on it. I think Booker's been doing a great job, but I said this before the playoffs started, folks. I'm going to reiterate it for you. They don't have enough. They don't have enough to go up against OKC. It's a mismatch. It's a heavyweight title. If this was a fight, they'd probably stop it. All right. Lakers over the Rockets. This was a big surprise to me. Not just that they're up 2-0, but also the way in which they've done it. They have looked good. They've really pulled it together here. Cinderella pulled it all together here, and they're making a run. I think the NBA would love to have the Lakers and the Celtics match up here. So keep an eye on that storyline, that baseline, folks, because you just never know with these groups. You know, you never know what they're doing behind the curtain, you know, and they could be stewing something up very similar to that in order to alleviate some of the problems they're having with the television people. It's right now, I know they say that they're having the biggest year. I couldn't find any playoff games on television in the beginning. They were on Prime. And I say to my wife, do we have Prime? And she goes, yeah, I think so, but I don't know how to get into it. And so I missed all of the first rounds. You know, I was watching them on my phone, just the scores and the updates and all that stuff, because the NBA didn't even have them on. They have them streamed somewhere else. I think that's a big mistake. I really do. But the Lakers are 2-0. Can the Rockets get back? That, I would say, they have a better chance than the Suns do. Because if they go in and take two, now you got a chance. But if the Lakers can go in here now, because this is where the Lakers are coming out with their haymaker. If they win game 3, it's over.
Yeah.
If they go 3-1, it's over. Because you got to go back to L.A. twice. And you're not going to beat them 3 out of 3 games. You know, the way they're playing right now and the way that you're playing right now. The Rockets look lost. They look like they have Kevin Durant and a bunch of other young guys, but they look lost to me right now. I don't know what Udoka can do to get this thing moving, but I think got to give J.J. Redick a little credit. He's got his team ready at the playoffs, and Pete might have hit on this a couple of weeks back when he said they were saving LeBron. They were saving him all year long.
Seemed like it to me.
He can be ready, and he does look ready right now. And so, Pete, a little bit of a prophecy there as well. The Nuggets and the Timberwolves, this is one of the series that I'm really excited about because I thought it would be tight. I thought it would be good. And right now, they've had a little bit of drama in there. They got a little bit of action going on in there, a little boom, boom going on in there. Anthony Edwards had a great game. Joker had a great game. But the piece with Randall is the piece that's really giving the Nuggets a little bit of trouble. They're having trouble guarding him. They're having trouble having anybody match up with Edwards as well. So I would give the Timberwolves a little bit of an edge here because they did punch that nose, and they got the 1-1, and now they're going back to Minnesota. So whoever gets up on that level right now, up on that ledge, because, again, if you go home and win 2 games, you're up 3-1. Then you got 2 out of 3 that you got to win 1 game. So it's a really, really good situation if they know that they can get that next game. Now, can the Nuggets come in, buckle it up, and tighten it up and take 2 games in Minneapolis? Maybe. It could happen, but those home court advantages aren't there for nothing. The Pistons and the Magic, I was really surprised at this, 1-1. Pistons have had a great year, but I also said they were lofty, and they were up on that perch, and they could get knocked. They could get bumped off of that perch, and I think that's a little bit of what's happening here right now. They have a good team, but they're not proven to be up on that lofty perch. They were really good as an underdog last year, coming after the Knicks, fighting the Knicks, being the resistance to that big New York powerhouse. Right now that they're the number 1 dog, they got people coming at them. They got dogs nipping at their heels right now, and that's a different feeling. It's a much different feeling. And I think the Magic, kind of like a bad kind of play there for them because this team's playing for nothing. They're supposed to go home. Supposed to be out of there in the first round. You know, they're an 8 seed. So they're playing pretty free right now, and now they're 1-1 going back to Orlando. Keep an eye on it, folks. Cavs and the Raptors. I can't say I'm surprised by this because I did think that the Cavaliers are going to be able to pull it all together if they get Harden and they get Mitchell going back. They got Mobley up front. They got a good team. But that 1-2 dynamic with those two guys, if they can pull it off, if you asked me beforehand, do you think that Donovan Mitchell and James Harden could coexist? I'd have to think long and hard about that one, But now watching them, it's really, really taken shape. And the Cavaliers, they could be the team to beat in that Eastern Conference if they keep it rolling. The Raptors down 2-0, going back to Toronto. Can they get something started there? No, I don't think they can. I'm going to give it the same thing that I said about the Suns. They just don't have enough. They've had a solid lineup. They've kept these guys together for a couple of years. They've built some chemistry. They've built some team integrities. But they still don't have enough. You're still Toronto. And you're up against the Cavs right now, who have underachieved all year. This is the flip side of what's happening with the Pistons, and a lot of reason why people think the Cavaliers can go. The Pistons climbed last year after being in a similar spot to the Cavaliers. Now, the Cavaliers this year were picked to be everybody's number one. In the East. They thought they were going to be the guy. And then they fell and they came down. But they might have put themselves into a really good position here because now they've got a pretty good series with the Raptors. They're up 2-0. I don't see them slowing down. Celtics and 76ers, I got to say, I was a little surprised by Game 2. The Celtics never, ever got in the game. Never got off the mat. They just looked like they were a step slow the entire night. 76ers came in with that VJ Max backcourt, and they took it at them. And when they had Pritchard come in the game, they went at him. You're going to see his minutes diminish a little bit coming down the road here because he's a great player, does a lot of really good stuff. But like a TJ McCollum, like some of these other guys, you can, TJ, the kid from Indiana, you can go after them on the defensive end, and that's exactly what's going on right now. Series tied 1-1. Keep an eye on it. They punched the Celtics in the nose, get to go back to Philly for 2. And again, this is a 7 seed. They're not playing for a lot. They're not playing with a whole lot of magic going on right now. They can lose and go home, and everybody will think the 76ers had a great year. That takes a lot of the pressure off, and now they can play free. They're young, and they're dangerous. And if I was the Celtics right now, I'd be looking at these guys a little bit like Rocky out of Philadelphia going, just keep an eye on these guys. They're hitting. They're getting after it. All right, Spurs and the Blazers tied 1-1. I thought the Blazers could give them a little bit of problem the entire time with this series, but now that Wembanyama is out, I think this series has shifted, and I think the Blazers now kind of got the open hand here. They have a young team, again, similar young team, 7 seed, playing for nothing. They can play loose. They can play free, and they're young. They got Danny Avdija. They've got Scoot Henderson playing now. They've got some other guys in there, Shaedon Sharpe. They've got a nice, young, athletic unit there. It's going to be something that the Spurs are going to have to really, really get after it and push. It's going to be one of those series like the Knicks had with the Pistons last year where they're going to get pushed, and this is the first round. You usually expect a little bit of that push in the semifinals. But now you're seeing it here in this first round. Pretty good for the NBA, I will say that. Knicks and Hawks, series tied 1-1. I'm going to go back and say this, that I'm going to just keep saying it until the cows come home. But I'm not a ball control guy. Watching Jalen Brunson squeeze the absolute life and air out of the basketball every single night does nothing for me. Nothing for me. The Hawks move the ball better. They come down the floor harder. They're playing with more enthusiasm. And I get it. The Knicks are talented. They've got OG Anunoby. They've got Big Cat, Karl Anthony Towns. They do have some talent. But right now, and I'm going to give it to my New York people, right between the eyes, you better be careful with this Hawks team. They're dangerous. They're really, really dangerous. Pete, what did you think of the interview?
I think it was great. Listening to Coach Larrañaga's story and just hearing some of the stuff going on, I would have loved to have asked him what he thought about the portal and why, and going through replacing teams. And was that a decision that led him into retirement?
That's one of the reasons I didn't ask it.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to bring it down. because I didn't think that was something that I think Coach.
If we ever got him back, I'd love to get his insight on that.
I think he'd probably be very, very give it a finesse answer and handle it very, very well because he's that diplomatic. But I think that's Coach Larrañaga is in that cabal of people that saw the change, reacted to the change, and it saddened me. To be honest with you, that whole thing just saddened me. And he's a great guy, great man, really good for the game of basketball, always has been. And I think that that's one of the things that got out of the interview. However that went down, I just think it wasn't a true reflection of the great career that he had.
Absolutely.
Pete, the weather is changing. We're going to get warm here.
I hope
NBA
so.
playoffs all the way down the road here. And again, I'm going to just give a quick shout out too because there's a band playing in the Shortstop's Garage this weekend, the Yacht Rock. They're unbelievable folks. I got my tickets. I hope you're ready. Rocking and rolling in the garage at Shortstop this weekend. We'll see you, Pete. Catch you in the zone.